Hello, my name is Megan Terry. I am actively pursuing a career in education. This has been something that I've wanted to do my entire life, so the fact that I'm actually to the point where I'm submitting a portfolio is amazing to me because this is the first semester that I've actually taken classes that have pertained to my degree, so it's been super exciting semester. The first thing that I have included is my resume. Um, I don't have very much experience, so my resume is kind of short, but I have included all the basic aspects. My skills, I am proficient with Microsoft Office. I'm a very fast learner. I pick up on things very easily, and I'm easily coachable. I'm receptive to feedback always. I like constructive criticism because it only allows me to better myself. I'm excellent. I have excellent written and verbal communication skills. I have customer service experience because I worked in the food industry for a couple of years. I'm patient and I'm empathetic. I have experience with team collaboration, but also experience in a leadership position. I'm very adaptable in certain situations, which I think ties in really well with problem solving. I have good time management and I pay great attention to detail. Like I said, my only work experience was when I was a teenager. I was a employee at Pizza Hut for about 3 years, but during that time I went from a CSR, which was like an entry level position, to a manager in training when I finally quit. My education, I included my high school. I graduated from Mesquite High School in 2019, and I am currently pursuing my Associates of Arts in Teaching at Dallas College. Next, I want to talk about my observation log. I typed out my notes for basically everything I observed that we did in the 4 days that I was there. I started on the 21st of October, and for my elementary hours, I went to Hamby Elementary, and my teacher that I observed was Rachel Sagala. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was spiral review. This is how the classes started each day. They're basically questions that Ms. Sagala put on the board to review the previous day's lesson. And then I wanted to talk about her teaching method, which was I do, we do, and you do, which is the gradual release of responsibility method. Basically, she would put a problem on the board and she would solve it, discuss it, model how she wanted students to go about solving it and what she wanted to be included in the answer. It wasn't about getting to the answer, it was about the process. So she wanted a visual to be included, she wanted a multiplication fact to be stated, a list, and she wanted to make sure that students were checking their work. And then they moved on to We Do, which is where they actively solved a problem together. She asked questions, she guided them through working on it. And then finally they went to You Do, which was where they did a problem on their own, and basically she checked it before they were able to move on to their independent practice. And if they got it right, they were able to move on to their independent practice. But if they didn't get it right, then she called them to the front of the classroom with other students that were struggling so they could practice more. Because a big thing for her classroom, and she had it written on the wall somewhere, was that practice until you get it right. So they practiced it until that the students felt that they actually had it down, and then they were able to move on to their independent practice. And then finally, independent practice. Like I said, this was like 10 questions that students did independently at their own desks because Miss Sagala, the way her classroom was set up, they had like places where students could go sit and work on, like their desks were in groups, but they had stations around the room where they could work collectively during I don't want to say lecture, but during instruction. So they worked on independent practice at their individual desk quietly. Students knew what was expected of them, which was like a voice level 0, and all other materials were put up except pencil and paper. And then if students had questions about the assignment, then she never deliberately helped them through the problem. Like she didn't go step by step showing them what they were doing wrong or how to set it up. It was more of like, what are you not getting? And like re-going over keywords. So I thought that was important to highlight because she was fostering more of a sense of understanding in her students. Even though, like, to us this is simple math, to them they obviously weren't getting it, so they are going to have a deeper understanding. And then also she provided a video for them to watch if they needed it on their Chromebooks. It was something called a class kick. I am not familiar with the program, but some students utilize that. So that's how the class operated for the first 3 days that I was there. But on the fourth day I was there, the students actually attended an assembly for rewards for like perfect attendance and stuff. It was the conclusion of the first 9 weeks of the school year. So after the assembly, Miss Segala realized that her students had a lot of energy. They were restless, they were talkative. She couldn't really get not a handle over them. So she decided that she was going to take the students outside to let them burn off some energy and talk without being disruptive to the other classes around them. And they just practiced multiplication facts, so it was just simple math, but it allowed them to improve their math abilities through practice, while also allowing them to burn out their energy. But overall, Miss Segala's teaching and classroom management strategies complemented each other perfectly. Whenever I interviewed her, she stressed the importance of including your HOTS questions, your higher order thinking questions. She said that that is what she based her whole lesson around. So from there, she moved on to her I do, we do, you do method, which gradually releases responsibility from the teacher to the students. And then another key component of my interview with her was that she stressed the importance of students being able to run their own classroom. And this is through effective classroom management strategies. At the beginning of the year, she told me that she established expectations and routines, and it was very evident that the students knew that. They knew what voice level was acceptable during what activities. There was a person in each group who had like everyone's pencils and knew when to distribute them. They knew when to have their whiteboards out. They knew when to have paper out. And they were actively engaged. She told me that it's important that the students feed off of your energy. So she was constantly moving around the classroom and yeah. And then for my middle school hours, I observed Starlinda Brightwell. She teaches 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classes at Ignite Middle School. So on the day that I was there, which I believe was November 13th, Miss Brightwell's 6th grade health classes were learning about vaping, and the classroom operated basically just through lecture. She had a PowerPoint on the screen at the front of the classroom and she talked about what was on the slides and then she showed them YouTube videos, and that was about it for what she did. The same thing happened in her 8th grade classes, except instead of vaping, they were talking about alcohol abuse. But yeah, her main method for teaching, I guess, was lecturing, and that was basically all they had time for. But for her 7th grade pathways to college and career readiness, the students were conducting research on local high schools that they wanted to apply to because this is a like innovation school, so they had to apply what high school they wanted to go to, and they were researching what endorsements they thought that they wanted to focus on. So Miss Brightwell modeled for students like where they should be looking for their information, what sites were like trustworthy, and how to record their information for submission. But overall, I believe that Miss Brightwell's teaching practices are were pretty outdated. She used more of a traditional lecture, teacher-centered, where she's delivering the information to the students, and they're not really engaging in the information. They're more just absorbing it, which I don't think that as is as effective. But as I say, she's a veteran teacher, so her practices are just not evolved, which no shade to her, but it's just not something that I am looking to implement into my own classroom. But then I included pictures of my logs. I have my hours as as well as my teacher's signatures. So next, my teacher observation review. I've pretty much touched this again, or in my notes, but I loved observing. It was great. I was so eager to get into the classroom, and it was just, I learned what I want my classroom to look like, and I learned what I didn't want my classroom to look like, and it was just great learning from experienced teachers. Um, Miss Sagala is basically how I would want. Miss Sagala's classroom was everything that I inspire for my classroom to be. And I've already discussed it. I talked about how she um, had effective classroom expectations and management. Like students knew what was expected of them. I talked about the I do, we do, you do model. And then for Miss Brightwell's classroom, her students, whereas in Miss Sagala's classroom, the students were engaged, they were actively participating, they were eager to be learning. The students in Miss Brightwell's classroom were distracted, they were disruptive, they were disrespectful. She had a hard time reining them back in. And I think this is mainly due to outdated teaching methods, like I already talked about, but also overcrowding. She had a very small classroom with a lot of students in it, and she discussed with me that she has special ed students in her classroom as well, and she doesn't really know how to accommodate for them. But yeah, basically, I think that Miss Sagala's classroom was a positive learning environment and that it enhanced engagement, everything that she chose to implement in her classroom. And I think that Miss Brightwell's classroom contributes to low student engagement. Next I want to talk about my philosophy of education, diversity, and inclusivity. This was an essay that we turned in, I believe, a month ago, and it was nice to reflect about what, like, at that point in the school year, I had learned a lot about teaching methods and differentiated learning preferences and the learning gaps that exist in the classroom, as well as like diverse backgrounds that exist in the classroom. But also I had lots of time to reflect on what my philosophy of education is. So basically, I want, yes, I want my students to be successful in the classroom. I want them to perform well on tests. I want them to get good grades. But more importantly, I want to make sure that everything I'm doing is preparing them for life. I want them to be successful and contributing members of society. And I feel that by providing them with the knowledge, emotional intelligence, and life skills necessary, that I will be able to do that. So I want to be very intentional with the material that I choose to present to my students. I only want to present lessons that are challenging and they promote creativity and critical thinking. I think that critical thinking is an important skill for students to learn how to utilize early because it's going to be something that they're going to use their whole life. It's going to allow them to understand why the world around them works the way it does. It's going to allow them to make well-informed decisions. And creativity, I always think that it's great to express yourself, and I want my classroom, I'm going to talk about this later, but I want my classroom to be a place where students feel safe to express themselves creatively. Um, and then I talk about student engagement. Students should be actively engaged. It means listening, um, actively listening, asking questions, responding to questions. They don't look checked out. I want them to be invested in what I am teaching them because it's their education. I want them to be invested in their education. Um, I talked about a flipped classroom, which I believe suits the academic needs of the newer generations better. So basically, they would learn the material outside of class on some platform where I would provide the material, and then when they get to class the next day, they would be able to interact with the material and apply it through hands-on activities and problem solving and collaboration with their peers. And it's more of as an educator, I would simply guide them instead of just supplying them with the material in class. This actually allows them to interact with it, which allows them to foster a better understanding, and they have a greater say in their learning process and over their education. And then this is what I was talking about earlier. Beyond the curriculum, I want my classroom to be a safe place for students. And I can do this by building meaningful relationships with students that are built on mutual trust, respect, and understanding. I want to personally teach elementary age students, and this is where they're going to be developing the most. And I want to help aid them in developing academically, socially, and personally. And I want them to know that they are safe to be whoever they want to be. They don't have to feel like they can hide it. You know what I mean? And another thing I really want to highlight is I want to teach students to be kind, loving, and compassionate and give them the tools they need to not only be great students, but more importantly, great people. And this is where I believe kids start to learn it. Yes, home life obviously has a lot to do with it, but this is like kids' second home. And I want to be an adult that inspires students to be great people. Then I talk about embracing failure. This is very important for me because when I was in school, I was so afraid to fail. And it made me not want to try. And it made me less willing to actually interact with material. Instead, I was so focused on getting everything right. So I want students to recognize failure and making mistakes as a natural part of the learning process. And by doing this, they are going to develop effective problem-solving skills and they're going to become resilient learners. And this is going to better prepare them for life later on because you're going to fail a lot in life. And while I'm not trying to, I guess, teach them this at such a young age, it's going to be something that I want them to be familiar with and not think it's the end of the world when they finally get into the real world and they do fail, because it's gonna happen. And then I start to talk about the diversity and inclusion, my philosophy of diversity and inclusion, and they go hand in hand. Um, Basically, no matter what background you come from, your perspectives, your race, your age, your gender, your socioeconomic status, your abilities, your learning styles, your culture. All students deserve the access to quality of education that they deserve. And I don't want to, I don't know how to say it. I want to acknowledge these differences because these differences are important because they make students who they are. But I don't want those to ever impact the quality of education that they are getting. They should be appreciated, they should be embraced, and they should be celebrated. So I want to expose students to a diverse and inclusive classroom because doing this early on, like I said, when they're impressionable and they're still developing, it's going to make them more tolerant, understanding, and accepting individuals. Um, this is another important statement for me, for my philosophy. I believe that all children are capable of learning, can reach their full potential if given the opportunity to do so. So this is, we've talked about it a lot so far, differentiated learning instruction. All students have learned differently at their own pace, and that's okay. I'm glad we're moving away from these outdated practices that are like a one size fits all approach and um, basically you're gonna learn this own way and you're gonna learn this one way, and if you don't, you I guess when I was in school, it was like if you don't learn this one way, then you're just dumb. That's how I feel like my teachers made kids in my grade feel, and I never want to make my students feel like that. So I always want to acknowledge the different variety of learning approaches. So we have our visual learners, we have our kinesthetic learners, we have our auditory learners, and we have our reading and writing learners. And it is important to personalize my teaching methods to address those different types of learners so that they're having the best learning experiences possible. But there's actually comprehension and I want them to be successful. Just because they learn differently doesn't mean just because they learn differently than the way I'm comfortable teaching doesn't mean that it should be that way. I should be able to adapt my learning or my teaching techniques to accommodate them because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to ensure that they are successful. So, and when I fail to do that, students can fall behind academically and it can cause them to disengage from the classroom in general. Um, and then, in conclusion, education is constantly evolving, adapting, and adjusting in order to meet the demands of an ever-changing world. Just because this is my education philosophy now doesn't mean this is going to be my education philosophy in 5 years, 10 years. So if it changes, that's okay. It doesn't mean that um, it doesn't mean that I am throwing away my principles. It just means that I'm adapting to my students' needs and I'm more adept to teaching my students. And I'm growing as an educator because I believe the best quality that you can get in or you can find in an educator is adaptability. Because even just because you have a lesson plan or you have any sort of plan of what a class or a normal school day is going to look like doesn't mean that that is going to be what happens. Numerous things can happen in the midst of a school day. Alright, and then next I want to talk about my 5 professional goals. These were I've already talked about these, I feel like, in my philosophy, but first I want to create a positive learning environment. I want to create a place where students feel safe, accepted, and supported for who they are and as a valued member of our classroom. They're there for 8 hours a day, and I want it to feel like it as much as theirs as it is mine. I talked about this earlier. I want to build meaningful relationships with students that are built on mutual trust, respect, and understanding. And then I talked about this in my philosophy of education as well, but recognizing failure and mistakes as a part of the learning process and providing feedback to them. I want to continuously evolve my teaching methods. Education is constantly evolving, so I need to make sure my teaching methods are relevant, effective, and engaging. Just like before, like when I'm talking about Miss Darlinda, she is so used to just lecturing and providing information and expecting students to absorb it and then go take a test and understand it. My teaching methods that are acceptable, or the teaching methods that are acceptable now, probably will change completely by the time that I am her age, per se. Um, and then I talked more about learning experiences that are tailored to meet the individual needs of students and their different learning preferences. And then I said to do this, I should regularly engage in professional development. Like I said, there's always something to learn, and I constantly need to be learning. So I am providing my students with the best education possible. Also, technology. I want to learn how to create and execute effective lesson plans. Every teacher that I observed this semester told me that they spend about 3 hours a week lesson planning, but as a new teacher, I am going to need to spend or dedicate much more time than that. Um, but yeah, I need to, for lesson planning, I need to assess my students' individual learning preferences, of course. This is basically the main thing of education, I feel like, is what I've learned this semester. And I need to administer some sort of assessment to figure out how they learn best. And then I need my lesson plans, just because at the beginning of the year my lesson plans look like are centered around one teaching method doesn't mean that they need to stay that way. I need to adapt them to meet the needs of my students, and that's going to change year to year because I'm going to have different humans coming through my classroom every year. And then, so not only do I need to provide an assessment at the beginning of the year to see how they learn best, I need to provide regular assessments to gauge student comprehension and determine how effective lessons continue to be. I want to I want to prevent teacher burnout. My stepsisters are both teachers. My childhood best friend's mom is a teacher, and as I've been pursuing this degree, they've told me that it hasn't their like it's not really worth it to them anymore and that I'm going to regret my decision. But I acknowledge that teaching is a demanding job with long hours, excessive workloads, and at times unrealistic expectations. But it is crucial that I bring the best version of myself every day so I can give the quality of education that my students deserve. I can do this by setting clear work-life boundaries and making self-care a priority. I need to make sure I'm checking in on myself, making sure that my physical health is okay, my emotional health is okay, and I should avoid bringing work home when possible. And then finally, my last goal is I want to effectively integrate technology into the classroom. Technology is a huge part of our society. I remember from when I was in school, I'm only 24, but technology has become such a great part of our lives, and I think that it's important that students learn how to utilize it because it's a tool. It's a great tool for them to utilize, and I need to be able to teach them how to utilize that tool so that they're successful in their careers and life. Because when I was younger, technology was just starting to be like we were just getting cell phone, like iPhones and stuff, and computers, and I felt very behind because my parents are older. They didn't teach me about this technology stuff. So and when teachers were telling me that I need to use technology, I felt very lost. So I feel like it's my responsibility to make sure that students are set up for success in that aspect. And then finally, my personal growth and reflection. At the beginning of the semester, a lot of what I knew about being an educator was mostly based on my own experience as a student. The teachers I had growing up implemented a teacher-centered approach to education, which is they stood in front of the classroom and they lectured, and I thought that's just what education was supposed to look like. In the times when I wasn't grasping what they were saying or I felt like it was information overload, it just made me feel like a failure. Because obviously they went to school for this, they should know best. But now, as I have taken this course this semester, I have realized that there are, my understanding has greatly evolved. I understand the importance of student-centered learning, tailoring instruction to meet students' unique needs, implementing strong classroom management strategies, and creating a learning environment where students feel loved and supported to be themselves. I've already highlighted these points in my philosophy and basically every other artifact that I have included in my portfolio, but it's just reflecting on what I know now that I'm pursuing this degree versus what I accepted to be normal when I was in school. I just know that I can deliver a better quality of education for the future generations, and it just makes me so excited. Um, when it comes to challenges, I think the most important thing that I've realized this semester, like I said, is that education is not a one size fits all approach. Every student has preferences on how they learn best and they learn at their own pace. And I should be able to implement differentiated instructional practices that meet the needs of all students in order to ensure that they are receiving the best learning experience possible. So, I've talked about this in my goals, but I'll go over it again. First, I will administer an assessment so I can identify each student's individual strengths and their learning preferences. However, the important part is that I need to continue to administer regular assessments to gauge student comprehension and the effectiveness of the lessons that I am presenting to them. And then also, I want to utilize group work because if I differentiated learning or instructional practices is I'm just one teacher with probably 30 kids. I can't give the same lesson at the same time in 5 different ways or 4 different ways. So if I can utilize group work and group students up with other students that learn the same way that they do, then I can better utilize time in the classroom and I can ensure that my students are more successful. And then lastly, uh, this semester has been incredibly rewarding and confirmed to me that I am both still passionate and committed about being a future educator. And that's what teaching is. It's a passion and it's a commitment. If your heart is not into your profession, you are going to fail your students. They deserve a teacher who is committed to their education, is as committed to their education as they are, and delivers the quality of education that they deserve. The teachers that I have observed this semester have been honest with me, explaining that teaching is a demanding job with long hours and excessive workloads and unrealistic expectations at times. However, they say that is a very rewarding career. Seeing students start out struggling at the beginning of the school year and what all they are able to accomplish and overcome by the end of the school year makes it all worthwhile. And I feel like this is still the most rewarding thing that I can do. I went into this semester thinking that I for sure wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And I still believe that. I still believe, after observing elementary and middle school, that I think that I could impact elementary school children's lives the most. And I am just so excited to get into the field. And I am excited to utilize what I have learned this semester because it all has been really insightful. So that is my portfolio. So Thank you.